Today's Blind Side is an extended version of my recent interview with Elizabeth Hobson, leader of the political party Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them, where we discuss career feminist Laura Bates's claim that she attended a 2018 men's rights event that Elizabeth helped to organise. Excerpts from the interview have featured in the Glass Blind Spot episode examining that very claim, and I'll also leave a link to Elizabeth's illustrious recital of the relevant passages from Laura Bates's book. I'll also include a link to Elizabeth's excellent new podcast, coincidentally called Messages for Men, which is an excellent and often very funny listen. So I recommend you check that out after you've finished watching Elizabeth Hobson helping me to fact check Laura Bates. Right, we might as well just launch into it then, because
I'm dying to find out what she's saying.
I'm sure you're dying to find out. Okay. So, right. I mean, okay, so specifically today, we're going to talk about a claim that she's made that, believe it or not, she claims to have attended a Messages for Men conference in 2018.
Yes, I did hear her say that on the Women's Hour, BBC Women's Hour, actually.
Okay.
Yes.
Did that?
I found it surprising.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I suppose I would break down her claims, or her more outrageous claims, into sort of three categories. And, one is, well, that's been debunked before, and she should know that. So she's been a dishonest witness by at least taking it out of context. I'm thinking of like the Paul Elam bash a violent bitch comments that is debunked, or at least placed in context in the Red Pill film. Then there are the sort of ones where it's kind of like, right, that seems unlikely, but I'm going to have to go and check because I'm not familiar with that before. And then there are a few where it's like, okay, I'm inclined, I'll take you at your word. And this is actually one of them. I kind of get the impression that she did, okay? But I'd like to read you the passages.
Okay. Can you tell me where it is?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm on the Kindle. So on the Kindle it says page 156. And I think that should tally with your page 156. It's chapter 4.
Chapter 4, Men Who Hound Women.
Oh, right, no, it's before that.
No, it's right. Okay. So we have different page numbers. So I'll just listen to you.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll treat you with Laura's wonderful words. I'll tell you, there's one bit at the start which kind of makes me particularly made me wonder. So I'll start with it because it's the bit that actually I have some involvement in potentially, because unfortunately I wasn't able to actually make the actual conference. So let's see where we get to. Yeah, okay. So in 2018, as I began to research this book, becoming a near constant lurker on the platforms on which men fantasize about violently raping women, discuss the best ways to trick and force them into sex, and bitterly rail against their right to vote or have an abortion, I stumbled across a video advertising an up-and-coming MRA conference, Messages for Men 2018. So as you remember, you had asked me to do a kind of promo video for Messages.
I certainly did, and it was an excellent promo. It was really good.
Yeah, I was quite proud of it. So for a minute, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to get a mention in Laura Bates' book.
Yeah.
But apparently not, because this video caught my eye primarily because it featured images of me, i.e. Laura Bates. It seemed to the organisers that the best way to advertise this conference about conveying positive messages for men was to use a video of images of high-profile feminists, most of them crudely photoshopped, to include devilish red eyes or horns. naturally, it seemed only fair to attend, given the lengths to which they'd gone to make me feel included. So I purchased a ticket online. So we'll just pause there for a minute, because you know, certainly I would have been aware that a few other people did sort of, you know, kind of brief video messages saying, you know, messages for men's happening, do come along. And I have kind of gone back and, you know, done a fairly reasonable trail or troll as best as possible. I can't find a video like that. Do you have any recollection of video advertising messages for men?
No, I don't recall that, as a matter of fact. You know, when you said it, I kind of thought, oh, I don't remember that, but it's not entirely implausible. But I mean, I do find it implausible that she was there, to be perfectly honest, because it's not a huge event.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at less than 200 people, like maybe 150. Mostly men, and almost all the women personally known to me and Natty. And, you know, tickets are checked on the way in.
Yeah.
She was a known face then. She, you know, she won Whiny Feminist of the Month and Lying Feminist of the Month first in 2014. So I find it really difficult to believe that she was there, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, so the one possibility that occurred to me is that perhaps at, you know, kind of Laura's level, shall we say, that one maybe seconds that sort of level of work to a minion to do it on their behalf. So, you know, I guess that's a possibility. It did strike me, I mean, kind of, you know, I think it's fair to say that Laura Bates is not you know, she's quite a striking woman. You know, she's quite an attractive woman, and sort of, you know, so it'd be hard to kind of miss, particularly even before you get to the point of, well, you know, quite a lot of people would have been aware of Laura Bates's column and, you know, everyday sexism claims and such. To clarify, she claims that she booked the ticket under her pseudonym Alex, which was the pseudonym that she kind of lurked on various incel sites and MGTOW sites. Although kind of
does it have a surname? Because I could check if she'd bought a ticket. I could do that.
No, I don't believe.
But
I don't. But yeah, it's not mentioned in the thing. But yeah, it'd be interesting to check if there are any Alexes. The other thing that kind of struck me, because I'm going to read you the details of what she says, and she says very little about the conference. It's actually quite snooty. But one of the things that struck me, you know, she spent £15 attending. If my memory's right, you know, that was roughly the price of the ticket. I remember, you know, kind of essentially messages for men, and particularly, you know, having done the promo for it. It's, you know, it's described as a mini conference. It's described as a day of celebration. You know, kind of certainly the promo, you know, I put together very much there was a sense of kind of, it is a, you know, slightly more relaxed type of event, you know, kind of including comedians and such, as opposed to ICMI, International Conference for Men's Issues, which had happened in the summer. And I remember asking you at the time of that conference, 3-day conference at a, you know, kind of major conference center, attendees from, you know, various continents, very high profile speakers, etc., and some very, very interesting talks. You know, did you get much interest from the media? And I do remember you saying that you had approached the likes of the Guardian offering free tickets if they. Is that correct?
Indeed.
Yeah. So
that's correct.
Mm-hmm. So that just struck me as ironic that, you know, kind of she could have gone to, you know, kind of, I suppose, a sort of a more formal conference, which is particularly because just in the way that she describes this. But anyway, I'll push on. On the morning of the event, the long-awaited email with the details of the secret conference venue arrived. I anticipated a university venue or perhaps a generic conference space or meeting hall. But the address, which I checked twice, was for an O'Neill's pub in Chinatown, London.
Yeah.
The email described it as an entertainment venue, but a quick Google of the pub website revealed that they don't particularly host events, but helpfully offer to reserve a space in the pub for people wanting to arrange drinks after work. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, my thoughts on that are that, you know, that's very true. That's where it was. And, you know, it is public information because Hope Not Hate published where we met.
Yes, that's correct.
So, you know, but
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, that all would have happened. The email would have come from Natty.
that's right. I mean, just the one thing that struck me, because, I mean, obviously, I'd be aware that all of the talks from Messages for Men, you know, were put online, and that's very much, I know that's very much an approach that yourselves and Tom, who does the filming, have taken. Of kind of the point is that sort of it's all there for people. You know, there's nothing done in secrecy or, you know, any kind of nefarious. People are welcome to consider the talks and make their own minds up. But certainly, I mean, if you look at those talks, it does strike me as it's not in the middle of a, you know, kind of pub with other punters. It's in a space, presumably upstairs, which is, you know, kind of room that can be booked for events. So, okay, let's see. So as I approached the venue, I saw a long line of people queuing eagerly ahead, an impressive turnout. But when I got a little closer, I realized that they were waiting to get into a popular Chinese dessert shop selling buns and pastries. Just beyond the queue, the entrance to O'Neill's was quiet, and the pub inside was trading as usual. I approached several confused staff members, most of whom seemed to have no idea that any event was taking place, before one disappeared to try and find out where the conference was being held. Eventually, he reappeared and directed me up two slightly sticky flights of stairs to a rather...
They are a bit sticky, actually.
Maybe
she was there.
it's as I say, kind of, you know, I certainly don't doubt that somebody was there. And, you know, kind of, as I say, I'm prepared to take her at her word on this one. The one thing I'm curious about this promo video, because, you know, apart from anything else, you know, I'd like to think that, you know, kind of my video managed to pull in a few punters and kind of, you know, sort of, well, it certainly isn't as she described. But then, yeah, the other aspect is it's kind of whether it was her or not, I guess. Okay. But that's two slightly cares. Oh, right, this is nice. O'Neill's pub will like this, but to a rather low ceiling room with dark grey painted walls, in which some chairs have been set out facing a makeshift stage, and in one corner...
Whoa. Hang on a minute. We're talking about the Flamingo Room here. That's like, this is a venue where the Beatles have played. It's not a makeshift stage. Sorry. Go on.
No, well, actually, again, having not been to the venue myself, it did strike me because I came across a video which quickly disappeared off the internet of Kate Smurthwaite, comedian, appearing at the Women's Equality Party Christmas party comedy fundraiser, wearing a strap-on black dildo and parading about on stage with it. And the venue actually, it had sort of kind of similar types of paintings, because I think the O'Neill's background, they seem to be like paintings of pop stars.
Yeah, there's like a Jimi Hendrix. Yeah.
And it looked very similar, and I did sort of back check on that. I think it was a different venue, but you know, I think, you know, the point being made that this was not a major conference. This was a mini conference on a Sunday after the Walk for Men, And I mean, it kind of ran from what, 3 o'clock to about 10 o'clock. So,
No, it was 11.
oh, well done. You wouldn't.
Yeah. And I think we overran as well. But, you know, as you say, it's a conference that is designed to be a fun celebration, you know, and we all march beforehand and, you know, do the graft and then go and have some fun with our friends and, you know, have a few speakers giving some interesting insights. But yeah, you know, it does sound, given that, you know, if she knew about Messages for Men, she must have known about the International Conference on Men's Issues, which
One
she could have gone to if she wanted to see a proper conference, you know.
Exactly. You know, yes, that struck me. I mean, I guess maybe it was just a bit closer to her home. Because I mean, certainly one thing that strikes me, because I did think her comments on Women's Hour were a little bit disingenuous, because she claimed to, you know, I've, you know, not only have I infiltrated them online, but I've been to their meetings in real life. And yeah, it's kind of like, well, yeah, you apparently have been to one, because that's literally all you claim in your book, you know, kind of, and it's, you know, you sat at the back and talked to one person. But yeah, no, this was a bit, okay. Makeshift stage, in one corner, a Christmas tree decorated with cheap red and silver baubles drooped slightly to one side. I remember that.
Yeah, I think I observed that too.
Okay. So there we go. So it's looking more and more likely. As I joined the dozen or so men waiting to be admitted, my heart started to beat faster. I couldn't help wondering what overlap there might be between present company and those who had sent me graphic emails about eradicating me from the world like a dripping poison, or waiting outside my house to rape me until I begged for mercy. I slipped quietly into a seat at the back of the room, sure that at any moment an angry hand would clamp down on my shoulder or a shout of recognition would ring out. But keeping my head down and allowing my hair to swing forward, partially shielding my face, seemed to work. After waiting a few minutes for my heart rate to stabilize, this is pretty extreme infiltration, this is. Purchasing a ticket on Eventbrite and attending an event in a pub. I raised my eyes to take in my surroundings. A bar stretched most of the length of the room, and many of the assembled men ordering drinks and greeting acquaintances. There were perhaps 60 men milling around, and I counted a handful of women, most younger than the men, and maybe 7 men of colour. There were no women of colour present. I'll pause there, because actually one thing, I suppose, kind of, obviously I'm hoping that, you know, kind of some of the people that have read Laura Bates' book will watch this. And one thing that kind of struck me is that in this chapter about men's rights activists, she steers very clear, almost entirely, of mentioning female men's rights activists. And having not attended the event, I don't want to kind of presume this, but my understanding was it was yourself and another woman called Natty that organised the event.
And yes, absolutely.
It kind of, I'm pretty sure I kind of watched an introduction. So, I mean, would it be fair to assume that people in the room would have understood that fact?
I would have been exceptionally surprised if anybody who was at the event didn't realise that it was organised and hosted by me and Natty. I did the introduction in 2018. Natty did the majority of the introductions to speakers. And yeah, I mean, I find it quite surprising to learn she would not be aware of that. And also, you know, 60 white men, 7 men of colour and a handful of women. There was a solid 140, if not 150. I think it was more like 150 for the record.
Okay, yeah, well, duly noted. Okay, so yeah, not one of her best statistical analysis then. Yes, and because that just again struck me, sort of, you know, I think we've talked about this before. Women who champion men's rights can sometimes be kind of doubly damned, and kind of feminists might, on some occasions kind of go after them, even people like yourself, more harshly. But then again, some of them just don't like to admit that the diversity in the leadership
No.
of this particular equality movement is slightly more diverse. So it struck me as certainly past remarkable that she doesn't really mention yourselves very much. There is one bit which I think maybe it could be Nazi, but we'll get there. The wife-wearing spotty teenagers squinting at computer screens in their mother's basements were not in evidence among the group of respectable-looking attendees. So I'm glad to hear everybody dressed up. They were men you would pass in the streets without thinking twice. Like the other inhabitants of the manosphere, they are men we all pass in the street. One sat down next to me and introduced himself amicably. We chatted about the area of London he'd travelled from, how it's quiet at weekends, which allows him to decompress after a busy week. He asked me politely about my own neighbourhood, and I sidestepped a couple of questions about what brought me here today, vaguely mentioning a desire to learn more about the movement. Technically true. Sorry, I've forgotten this, but she literally says this. I'm vaguely mentioning a desire to learn more about the movement. Technically true. So he told me he'd attended previous events, including one in Birmingham, and found it convenient that most gatherings of this sort in the UK seem to take place in London. We exchanged a few further pleasantries before lapsing into silence. Later, he would give a speech about launching legal action against former CPS chief Alison Saunders for the crime of championing victims of sexual violence during her time in the role. Just going to pause on that. Now, by the process of elimination, my assumption is that was a chap called Jordan. Does that seem likely to you?
Oh, wait, but I mean, he's not a Londoner.
Okay.
Which?
Yes. Well, actually, that's interesting because kind of.
I mean, unless there was some crossed wires, because he would have been staying with a friend of his who is in London.
Okay. Well, I suppose kind of maybe a starting question was, did Jordan speak at that event?
2018. I did look at the speakers list, and I don't recall seeing Jordan on there. But let me pull up the speakers list again. It's in. Okay. I'm in the wrong. Where am I? So let me think. There was 2018, 2019. And 2017. I think Jordan spoke at 2017 and not 18, but I could be wrong. Oh, what am I looking for?
Maybe there's some sort of time vortex at the back of O'Neill's pub.
Sorry, do excuse me. Right, here we are. So that's the I've got the press release here, and that does have the speakers in. So John Waters. It could have been Craig, actually.
Well, that was my other thought, because kind of, obviously I looked at, kind of everybody I included in the promo, and I, included everybody that I knew was definitely speaking. Appreciate sometimes there could be kind of last minute changes. Let's see. I checked out the sort of the videos that are kind of on certainly the Messages for Men YouTube page, and yeah, Jordan doesn't appear to be on either of those lists. Yes, Craig was then my next thought. Craig's going to hate me
Mm.
for saying this, but based on both the book description and the description of women's art, she seemed to kind of be sort of talking about a slightly younger man. Like Craig would strike me.
Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of the impression that I got, was that she was talking, because on Woman's Hour I thought she said he was about 30.
Yeah, she said
And
30.
I mean, I think it would be a fairly kind guess to put Craig
Yeah,
around 30.
yeah, and
But, maybe she is particularly kind and generous in her
that,
age estimate.
that is.
Um,
Um, but again, I suppose kind of the two other things were then sort of let's see, Jordan is a particularly dapper chap. It has to be
he
said,
is,
and she
particularly.
particularly, and she did talk about being extremely well dressed, and with great respect to Craig, who dresses very well also. Jordan would just be in the dapper area, so so it just the description slightly younger, dapper,
Yeah.
um, and the
Wait, wait,
oh right,
wait.
okay, yeah,
Jordan helped Natty introduce some of the speakers. And there was a moment where we had some technical difficulties, and
okay,
he may well have been on the stage
okay.
having a word.
Okay, so I'd say you may have kind of mentioned, because that was the other thing
Yeah,
from my memory
no,
of ICMI 18. Jordan spoke at that, and certainly that was a kind of key area, was the issue of prosecutions. That was a kind of a key area that's kind of he's researched and worked on. So I would be surprised if he bayed for the blood of Alison Saunders.
yes, no, exactly, because that's what she said on Woman's Hour, that he bayed for Alison Saunders' blood, and that I don't recognise that.
Yeah,
I absolutely don't recognise that.
we could forgive her for a kind of colourful metaphor, because certainly in the book version she seems to be talking about, he would give a speech about launching legal action against former CPS chief Alison Saunders. So I gotta get in touch with Jordan and see if he's got any memory of this. But kind of so okay, so it sounds like she's still in the game. She could sort of
yeah. Although if it was Jordan, then I'm going to give him a kick for not recognising her.
Well, yeah, that it strikes me as So that's,
There you go.
who knows. Okay, so this could be you now, Elizabeth. So
Oh,
here we go. A young woman took to the stage, welcoming the attendees to the conference. That was that. You did the introductions, did you say? Yeah.
sounds like me to me.
Okay. There followed an incongruous diversion to classical mythology. As she
Yes, that's me.
You're in Laura Bates's book. Get in. They followed. Oh, sorry, I've done that bit. To classical mythology, as she drew our attention to the conference leaflets, which featured a muscular man clad only in a loincloth, working at a fire with metal tools, surrounded by other crouching male figures. And absolutely, I remember that image and that ticket.
Beautiful leaflet.
Yeah, yeah, very well done. The homoerotic nature of the imagery was apparently not intentional. She explained that the image was. Yeah, so maybe pause there for a point of clarification. What was, I mean, I appreciate sort of, this was a couple of years ago now, and the introduction might have been a bit off the hoof, but can you recall any banter about the homoerotic nature of the painting?
No, there wasn't. Because, obviously the homoerotic nature of the leaflet was entirely intentional. But no, there wasn't any of that.
Yes, and that, so that sort of certainly jumped out, particularly given her very particular attention to detail when it comes to respect for diversity.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that sounds a bit
homophobic.
Yeah,
I thought so.
yeah.
And just, I mean, I suppose it fits. I did, I was 50-50 on this. I sort of thought, okay, there might have been some sort of, kind of comment or something at the thing, but it's in keeping with the very catty-like nature of this description, because I think it stands in, kind of direct comparison to her description of the speeches, which we'll get to in a minute. So look forward to that. I was talking to one of the speakers earlier, and he was very excited to hear that Laura might have mentioned his speech. I think that was the keynote speaker, actually, William Collins. So, but anyway, we should get there. She explained that the image was supposed to represent Prometheus's sacrifice in defying the gods to bring fire to man. Fire, she explained, represents so many important masculine qualities. A comment about Pandora bringing all men's problems was met with appreciative sniggers.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Okay, the seemingly obligatory requirement of a vague classical reference to add a sense of authenticity was thereby duly satisfied. So well done you for getting a bit of classical literature into an extreme
into a Laura Bates book.
Yeah, so but obviously now we're kind of getting into the extreme misogyny. We were taken on a whistle-stop tour of the year's major events as perceived by an MRA, which presumably is still you. The Kavanagh hearings, after which Brett Kavanagh was confirmed as a Supreme Court Justice, in spite of claims he had committed sexual assault, were cast as the downfall of the Me Too movement, much to the appreciation of the crowd. Mm-hmm. But the biggest cheer by far was reserved for the announcement that both Donald Trump and his wife Melania, what's his wife? Melania, sorry, apologies. Melania had made statements in support of men and justice following Kavanagh's confirmation. This struck me as the most significant moment I witnessed. Men all around me were cheering and clapping approvingly, nodding encouragingly at one another. It was the first tangible proof I had seen that the words and actions of Trump have had a direct evangelizing impact on these movements. Any comments or thoughts on that?
No, I'm really pleased that she listened to me so well, because all of that did happen. But I mean, the idea that we've all been evangelized by Trump, I think, is not quite right. We've all been, doing what we've been doing and thinking what we've been thinking long before Trump came along,
Yeah. Kind of one of the things that strikes me, having attended the ICMI in Chicago, and Philip Davis MP spoke, there was a similar moment when he spoke about taking some amendments back to the UK Parliament for the domestic abuse bill, and inserting a clause around coercive, identifying, acknowledging parental alienation as domestic violence. And there was a ring of cheers from the room, and the thing that struck me was kind of like it was a group who have very little political voice, very little kind of voice in policy making and legislation, and the very fact that somebody was talking about them, I would imagine, be greeted with a cheer.
Yeah.
So the very fact that both Donald and Melania have made statements in support of men and justice, yeah,
it was a really nice moment.
Yeah. So, okay, so where were we? His statements are seized upon and held as direct approval and encouragement for the manosphere and its ideology. So there you go. The conference was small and its attendees' arguments weak. But emerging from the pub into the bursting central London streets reminded me just how real these communities are, in a way far more tangible than easily closed tabs on the online forum. The online forum hatred littering my laptop screen might suggest. So yeah, so the conference was small and its attendees' arguments weak. That's her assessment of all of the speakers that ran late to 10:30.
That's it.
That's it.
Oh, for goodness sake! Come on now.
So I'm tempted to suggest that maybe she did one after your introduction, because kind of I mean, you know, there was a colourful list of speakers.
Yeah.
I was going to say I haven't watched them all, but the ones I watched Craig Stanford's one just recently in reviewing this, and I thought it was very good, very powerful. And William Collins's one was excellent. And you would have thought there would have been at least some sort of analysis.
Well, not only that, but John Waters was the keynote that year.
Yes.
William Collins was keynote 2019 when the Empathy Gap came out.
Yes.
But not only was John Waters keynote, but he then rescued us when either a speaker dropped out or I think a speaker had dropped out, and we were like, what are we going to do? And John Waters said, I'll come on stage and talk again. And he gave a really, powerful, interesting, non-feminist, in the extreme, speech about abortion. Okay. And it would just surprise me if she had seen that and not mentioned it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Being anything other than pro abortion is misogyny to them, right?
Basically, yeah. And yes, and that's I mean,
another... she did mention was it on Woman's Hour or was it on Loose Women about how there are men who don't support a woman's right to abortion, so it obviously annoys her.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, actually. There would have been presumably enough comments that could have been plucked from context, or kind of that she particularly, or even just that she politically disagreed with and viewed it as kind of hate speech, as these people do.
God, and there was Will Franken was it 2018? I think it was 2018 when he did an impression of every Guardian cover where he kind of puts a scarf over his head like a Muslim woman and does this kind of face.
Okay. And
I would have thought you'd have mentioned that too.
Presumably. And Neil Linden spoke at that event as well, if memory.
Yeah, but I mean, I think she would have found it quite difficult to take any issue with Neil Linden's speech. His speech that year was about how brilliant it is that there are so many women in the movement and how it's women who are going to really lead the charge for positive change. Yeah. So, good luck dissecting that with your,
Yeah. Interesting, yeah. No, well, look, fair enough. Thank you very much for talking to me on this. We'll talk again about the allegations, the claims, and views that she has about your political party, Justice for Men and Boys, and the women who love them. Because there's a fair bit of that. So I'll send you the kind of page numbers and stuff, or roughly where they are, and because they're mostly in the chapter the men who hate. No, sorry, what were the men's rights movement called? The men who blame women. That's right.
We don't blame bloody women. We blame feminists.
Yes, that is always kind of overlooked slightly. So yeah, and you know, like one thing.
Ooh, sorry, I've just opened the chapter. Mike is going to be so excited. I don't know what are those little quotes at the top called, because he's got one right there.
Yeah,
Center stage. How lovely.
I think he might even have two. I could be wrong about that because I know Paul Elam's got one, and bizarrely so is John Humphreys from BBC Radio 4. He dared to suggest that Me Too might be kind of turning into a bit of a witch hunt, which, you know, to even suggest that on mainstream media, it's quite shocking. Yeah.
Oh gosh, Warren Farrell. Sorry, I'll put
Oh,
it down. I'm looking forward to this though. It's going to. Do I need to not read it until you
no,
get?
that's fine. I just wanted to see your kind of surprise at you know, kind of her claims about attending Message for Men, because you know, I thought it was quite funny, but also as I say, I kind of, you know, I veered towards believing her, but you know, kind of it just
I agree with you. I also veer towards believing her, but I also agree with you that, you know, of everything that was said, to kind of for her to concentrate on my little introduction. I mean, there were bits that would stick out to her, you know, and I can understand that, but like I wasn't the most interesting person there by any stretch of the imagination. So,
well, don't be too hard on yourself, but you know, we're in good company. Certainly, there were, you know, there were a good list of speakers.
I was in good company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, my assessment would be that you know, she kind of probably arrived sort of quite soon to when it was starting and stayed for you know, the introduction, maybe another speaker,
Yeah.
and that was it. Because I mean, you know, to the thing that strikes me as most underhand about this book, doesn't strike me as remotely surprising, but it strikes me as childish as well, I guess, is that she speaks a lot about a lot of men and a little about a few women, including herself, but she didn't take the time to talk to any of you, apart from briefly to possibly Jordan. You know,
Yeah.
so how can you, you know, kind of have a balanced view about what people believe or what people, you know, what people are motivated by, unless you talk to them? Otherwise, you're just purely projecting your own narcissism on them, basically, would be my view. And that's the ultimate irony, kind of whatever, you know, I guess, you know, kind of I have been involved in this movement as well. And you know, one of the things I would view it, well, I suppose kind of, you know, my perspective on this is that there are kind of lobby groups who are speaking on behalf of all of the protected groups in the Equality Act. So there are groups speaking on behalf of men, of the LGBT, or sorry, of women, of the LGBT community, of people from different religions and backgrounds and ethnicities, etc. And of course, it makes sense that there should be people speaking on behalf of men, particularly when feminists don't. They simply don't. And there's, you know, again, she displays her ignorance in this book about sort of, you know, kind of how little she really knows about the issues that men experience. And it's not, I mean, I suppose kind of what might be useful is, do you want to say a little bit about, let me read you a couple of quotes that she said about the men's rights movement. Now, they're not going to surprise you because they're, you know, they're pretty much the type of things that feminists say about the men's rights activists, that they don't do anything to help men. Ironically, if only they understood that patriarchy hurts men too, then they would become feminists and we could all work together. But I suppose kind of the bit that's certainly kind of my perception and experience of talking to the sort of people that attend events like that would be that, let's see, well, it would be that they're passionate about men's rights and boys, and quite often they've kind of had a very kind of difficult experience, particularly in the likes of family courts. Many of them have very little time for feminism and will speak, kind of very negatively about feminism, as people do about different political ideologies when people have views about these things. But would you think it would be fair to suggest that many of them hate women?
No, absolutely not. I think that, I think in society, most of the actual kind of misogyny is the kind of bigotry of low expectations that comes from feminists. Or even, gendered slurs like, questioning your ability to be a mother that feminists throw at non-feminist women. I'm sure that there are men in the world who hate women, but they're not coming to my events. They're just not.
Yeah, that certainly kind of wasn't my experience. And the other question really would be, do you think many, because I suppose kind of the central theme of men's rights activism is about human rights and I guess equality of opportunity also. Do you think that many men involved in that movement don't believe in or want equality for women?
Absolutely not. No, I think there's a great quote that I always attribute to Dean Esme, but I think someone might have said it before him. But I found it in one of his articles, and he said that equality will be a step down for women, because women are privileged in many ways in our modern societies. If you look, say, at the way the family courts are run, and women are given free rein to dictate exactly the arrangements they want. And if it was run in a more egalitarian way, then, women would have less control and less power in that sphere. So, it might be fair to say that men's rights activists often want to take some rights, or not rights, like some power away from women, but not to an extent where they want women to have less rights than men. We want equal rights and responsibilities.
Yeah, and again, that's certainly been my experience. I think kind of when you step outside of feminism, there, kind of most people on the streets, I think, believe in equality, but also accept that.
Well, yeah, according to Fawcett, it's true.
Yeah, well, exactly. But also accept that there are, kind of men and women can be different in stereotypically.
So there'll be different outcomes if you look at society from a macro level.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean to say that you can see a man and a woman walk into a job interview and go, I don't need to talk to either of you. It's either you or you based on what's down there.
Yeah. Exactly. And the thing that strikes me that kind of most people, as Foss sort of acknowledged, would be what we would probably describe as egalitarian, as opposed to feminist, in the sense that they agree they want equality for everybody essentially, and that's something, and they're happy to work for that. The perception, I think it's fair to say that the perception of men's rights activists is still very negative and quite almost kind of jokey. I'm talking outside of feminists. I'm talking about just kind of mainstream, a bit pathetic, or but the thing that struck me, kind of, even if you were a lay person reading this, I think you would really struggle not to see the irony of what Bates is presenting, which is a very extreme fixed ideology. Now, it's not an ideology I recognize, but I would recognize the fact that she is speaking from the place of an extreme ideology. Laura Bates is probably the world's most famous keyboard warrior. She started out, with the Everyday Sexism Project. She believes that there's an entire sex in a society that want to exert power and control over people like her.
Well, yeah, not only that, when I was listening to her interviews earlier, she was talking about, the reason that we don't recognize all of this murderous misogyny that's going on is because we just don't care when women are murdered. We don't even notice. We just take it for granted that that's what happens. Of course men murder women. It's like, where are you living? What?
Yeah, no, exactly. So we'll finish with a few quotes. Feel free to stop me, or just giggle away, or whatever. But these are a few quotes I plucked out, where she's specifically talking about MRAs, or women's wrong activists, as she prefers to describe you. MRAs are about as focused on men's rights as defence contractors are invested in maintaining peace. MRAs are concerned to the point of obsession with attacking women, especially feminists.
Only feminists.
Yeah, and
some of them are men, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of attacking is a pretty emotive word, but kind of that's criticism of political ideology.
Yeah.
Is what happens in politics, and
it's politics.
Laura Bates is certainly attacking a political ideology in this book. Not only do MRAs do vanishingly little to tackle the very many real issues affecting men, their efforts actually impede progress for many male victims. This actually, one that sort of jumped out at me was, she made the observation that men's rights activists don't do enough about pregnancy discrimination, which kind of struck me as kind of to some extent like a kind of a new complaint that I hadn't heard before, but to some extent, kind of they're always saying, well, men's rights activists don't do enough for women's rights, and kind of that's exactly the same complaint that would be put at
sorry, hang on a minute. She didn't actually say that we don't do enough about pregnancy discrimination, did she?
I think she either literally said that, or she literally said that men don't, kind of men's rights activists don't care about things like pregnancy discrimination. And kind of,
I assume by pregnancy discrimination, she's not talking about the fact that women have unlimited, choices when there's a pregnancy, and men have zero choices.
No. Well, certainly the way I interpreted it was pregnancy discrimination at work, because that's certainly an area that's, well, kind of in my professional life, I certainly have done a lot about pregnancy discrimination in work, and the reality is that sort of, kind of certainly when women become pregnant in the workplace, that can still be an issue. And I don't think anybody would deny that kind of thing. Now, people might have different opinions about, kind of the difference in maternity leave between, paternity leave, etc. It just struck me as well, kind of, kind of women's rights advocates or feminists don't do very much about even male genital mutilation or, kind of cutting babies' genitals unless it's a female baby. So let's see what else we got. Let me see. We'll finish on this one. I'm interested to hear your view on this, because essentially, having kind of recently become the leader of Justice for Men and Boys, I think kind of very much something that vexed her in that chapter is that she resents the fact that people like the likes of Mike Buchanan, the former leader, have been welcomed onto the BBC and even, kind of sat across the table from her and kind of discussed the possibility that men might have problems too.
I know, it's just outrageous the way people are allowed to have different opinions to Laura Bates.
Their representatives find fertile ground in news programmes concerned with providing balance. They smuggle some of the misogynistic ideas of the wider manosphere into the public eye behind the false shield of credibility. So the contemporary men's rights movement have been defined, at least partly, as a reaction to diminishing social status of cisgender white men, and the emergence of feminist and multicultural activism as the mainstream political force. I don't think that's necessarily unfair, actually. Is that?
If you look back, at the grandfather of the men's rights movement, which would be Ernest Belfort Bax, his work was very much a response to feminism. And, what he identified was that feminists, while in, the turn of the 20th century, there were legitimate rights issues, that feminists campaigned on. They campaigned for a whole host of privileges and special treatment. He was in the business of pointing out that what they're doing is, he called it sentimental, was the word he used, when, it was all of, I suppose, perhaps he got that word from the Declaration of Sentiments at Seneca Falls, when it was about privileging women, specifically. And so, I don't think that's entirely unfair.
Yeah.
I do think that there is space for, identity politics, really. And so perhaps there is space for women's rights activists and for men's rights activists and all the other people, to just present and represent, the interests of the groups.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the way I was kind of interpreting that. Kind of like, obviously her perception is that men had it good all these years. It's only really in recent years, with the emergence of feminism and multicultural activism, that kind of men are losing out. And the way I would see that is, it's kind of, is it a reaction to it, or is it kind of that's an obvious inevitability of identity politics? Is that if you have people representing groups of people, which is essentially to some extent a trade union in terms of
Mm.
expressing views and concerns and difficulties and aspirations, etc., then it would seem unfair to exclude some people from that conversation. And I think we have
Yeah.
a very good example of that with the domestic violence, in terms of the consultees that were invited to the events.
And
Weren't, including the LGBT community, who weren't invited. So we'll look. Okay, we'll finish with this one, because I think this kind of sums up her kind of mendacity in terms of kind of squishing everybody together and kind of creating this pipeline to kind of extremism.
neo-Nazism. Is it
Exactly.
that one?
White supremacy, kind of all the basket of deplorables. The efforts of the men's rights movement to frame itself as a morally upright campaigning force enable it to take on a role of a conduit for some of the most extreme ideas of the broader manosphere, coding much of the same ideology that is rife on incel or pickup artist websites, with a veneer of respectability and righteousness. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're a gateway drug. It's because from what she was saying in the interviews I watched, she seemed to be saying not only are we the gateway drug, but that we know it, because she was talking about, she always mentions Andrew Anglin from the Daily Stormer, who I didn't know until I read one of her articles. And she kind of suggested in her article that he was an MRA. And I was like, I don't know that MRA. So I looked him up and the Daily Stormer came up and I was like, right, thanks, Laura. Yeah, it's incredibly offensive. Quite ridiculous. The March for Men, was it in 2018? It certainly was in 2019, organised by a team of men and women in collaboration with me, but a team of men and women from the Save Indian Family Foundation, who are all very much brown, and we are a fairly diverse movement in terms of skin colour. And I think it's representative of our wider society. We are predominantly white, but so is the UK.
Yes. So, yeah. Well, we certainly haven't got to the stage where people are kind of describing a movement of white MRAs, which is the case with white feminism. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Description, which I would suggest that from a class perspective, whereabouts certainly kind of fits into that distinction to some extent. I'll be interested once you read the book in full of this thought, because having read it, and I don't want to necessarily, well, no, I do actually. Having read the book, I view it as a direct hit piece and criticism. I view the men's rights movement as the main target. I view that chapter in the men's rights activism as the main target, because men's rights activists and the men's rights movement are competition. They're the competition to feminism. They, she doesn't want anybody across the table criticizing or challenging her views. And it strikes me that sort of like she's in an extremely privileged position, certainly listening to that Women's Hour interview, kind of the BBC didn't challenge her at all.
Nor did Loose Women.
And hence, so she's kind of spoiled to the extent that she thinks she can get away with such extraordinary claims. So thank you for coming and helping us at least sort of dissect one of what I think is probably one of the more credible claims in the book. So I'll be interested to talk to you again about some of the others. And
yes, Well, I hope I will be sitting across the table from her very soon and get to talk to her myself, get my book signed.
Yeah, yeah.
I love a signed book. I've never had one from someone I absolutely despise, but I think I'd quite like that too.
Well, kind of hopefully, I would like to think, I don't watch Loose Women, surprisingly, but it strikes me as, kind of quite a show that, covers a range of diverse subjects, and I wouldn't be surprised if they gave you a right to reply, if you asked them. So probably more so than the BBC, my guess might be. But
well, it's always worth an ask is my motto.
yes, absolutely.
Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.